You know, this is probably one of the first times that I've ever done a video talking positively about something, and I'm being paid to talk about Pokemon, so hey. Who am I to complain about this? Pokemon has a lot of interesting characters in its roster. Whether or not you like them, sometimes Pokemon can make a very interesting character story-wise. So, meet Natural Harmonia Gropus. Yeah, that's actually the full name for the character. Which is so weird that I love it. But it'd be a pain to say the name all the time, so... And it is! Now, if you're not familiar with Pokemon, God do I envy you people to avoid that toxicity on Twitter. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the series, we're talking about the final mainline games that were done in 2D pixel artwork. Generation 5, Pokemon Black and White. Now, you need to realize something. Pokemon has always been a game of monsters over men. What I mean is that Pokemon tend to be not overly focused in the narratives of the story, and this was true for the first few games. Granted, I'm not saying that Pokemon doesn't have any writing in it, and if you look towards characters like Cyrus of Team Galactic or such, you'll find some characters there. Granted, some characters like, say, Lysander are, well...
You were chosen to be a movie star, correct? Isn't it your duty to be ever beautiful? Everything beautiful should stay that way forever. I would end the world in an instant so that beauty never fades.
Oh, such wasted potential. Blah. Especially when you consider the previous generation, Generation 5, when the series actually tried to be more story and RPG focused. Like, Pokemon Black and White were said to be more like classic RPGs. It's why you'll have more interactions with the gym leaders and the attempt at a deeper plot. I say attempt since a lot of people tend to ignore the actual nuance of the themes of the games and their antagonists. You see, one of the major themes of Black and White is unity. It's a theme that's even built into the setting. Black and White are set in Unova, a region based on New York City. If you know anything about New York City, well, it's a city I never want to step foot again after getting mugged, but New York City is known as a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and even people. Or that's what it's known for. And this is reflected back in Unova. It's why you see so many different kinds of NPCs, cultures, and even the variety of Pokemon in there as well. Like, you'll have people question why Kofagrigus, an obvious Egyptian-styled Pokemon, makes his debut in a region that's based on America. It's not out of place. In any case, back to this, it extends to Pokemon and humans. That despite the differences between humans and Pokemon, they live and work in harmony. It's what Team Plasma hopes to break, the evil team of the games and the major antagonists. And for our character of the video, N is of the belief that it's for the better. But before we can get to that, we need to actually talk about who N is. Just for those who don't know the glory of N. Who is N? Well, to start things off, N is an orphan, abandoned in the woods and raised by Pokemon. This is obviously a very important aspect to N's character, since it showcases that he has a blatant connection to Pokemon. It's a bit of a twist of that the wild child trope, like how you would see with stories like Tarzan. The wild child N who has a connection with the world of Pokemon and can even communicate with Pokemon as if they were people. According to N's attendants, Anthena and Concordia, N has a heart that is pure, and N's ability to connect to the hearts of Pokemon was what drew him to N. That person is Ghetsis, the leader of Team Plasma. He's actually very important to this because, well, it was at this event that N was essentially abused by neglect and forced to be isolated from humans. Ghetsis took in N, and Ghetsis' plan was to have N see only Pokemon that were abused by people in order to influence N's perception on how humans treated their Pokemon friends. It's why N despises trainers at the beginning of the game, and why he wants to have Pokemon to be separated from humans. In addition, he believes that what Team Plasma is doing is righteous. After all, when you're being raised to believe something when you're a little kid, that sort of mindset is hard to crack, especially as an adult. N believes that he's actually helping Pokemon, unaware that his mindset can actually hurt them in the process. It should be known that N is probably one of the most popular Pokemon characters in the entire series, and there's a good reason for that. He's probably one of the most intriguing characters throughout the series, and we're going to go through the reasons why through this video. So, like I said before, I gave a quick preamble about N's character for people who get caught on with it. One of the major themes of Pokemon Black and White is, well, reality isn't black and white. This is really to be expected when you consider that N views humanity, save for the ones who conveniently share his beliefs, as bad, and Pokemon to be good, with the former actively hurting the latter because of their interactions. It's why N believes that separation is necessary. It's even hinting at with the lines spoken at Charredstone Cave, Black and White will be clearly distinct. And just for the idiots out there, no, that isn't a euphemism for racism. Anyone who thinks that is just being an idiot. N is talking about separating Pokemon and humans. It's literally in the same sentence. It's also le motif of the game's Pokemon Black and White, that the world isn't black and white, and that there are many shades of gray. And you have to remember that this is a mindset that was engineered to him ever since he was a little kid. But here's the thing. N is a great foil to the typical Pokemon protagonist. N is what you'd call an anti-hero, basically a central character in media who lacks conventional heroic attributes and can sometimes even be seen as a villain at times. This aspect shines through when you consider the world of Pokemon. The questions of why Pokemon are used for fighting and how cruel trainers can be with them is often ignored in the narratives. And for good reason, because, well, the games consider the world of Pokemon to be a utopia. This is by design, of course, since there have been plenty of times where the creators of the games have stated that the world of Pokemon is more of a utopia. Hell, if the big bad villains can be beaten by a child, or if godly creatures can be tamed by said kid, well, this must be a really great world to live in. When you come across N in Accumula Town, we're first introduced to Getsis, who is talking about Pokemon liberation and questioning why people capture and battle Pokemon, with the argument that this is a form of abuse, even being slaves to their trainers. This is where we begin the rivalry between the protagonist and N. And while you as a person can agree or disagree with N's belief system, N follows the logic that he was raised upon. You see, N is the ideological opponent to not only the world's ideals, but even to the core concept of the games of Pokemon. Think about it for a second. What can you say about the protagonists of the games? They're essentially coming-of-age stories, where the protagonists of Pokemon are children who are venturing out to learn about the world of Pokemon and going against the strongest trainers around. We're always told that trainers form bonds with Pokemon, and considering that people nowadays will foam at the mouth for not being able to play their favorite Pokemon in the games, I think it's safe to say that those bonds do exist even on a meta level. The difference between the players and N, though, is that the bond between players and their Pokemon is made during the course of the game. Meanwhile, N can instantly befriend wild Pokemon to help him in his battles. I'd also be remiss if I didn't bring up that we as trainers will often box our Pokemon and leave them to collect dust if they aren't useful to us, or if we find a better version of said Pokemon. Unless you've got a big bond already established throughout the journey, you're more than likely just going to discard your Pokemon for one that has better stats or is even a shiny. N, on the other hand, the Pokemon who join him automatically trust him, and they join him in a single battle before he allows them to leave on their own accord. Whether or not they're good is never part of the mindset, and just lets them do as they please to help him. We also have to consider the fact that he's pretty much the only rival to use a legendary Pokemon, an honor that's usually reserved for the protagonist alone in these games. And to top it off, we have N's design. If you look at his design, he holds a lot of elements that traditionally belong to previous protagonist designs, most notably the traits of the ball cap, which is mostly used by male characters. Even from the early days of Generation 1, the ball cap has always been a universal aspect for the player character. Most of the time, the original designs for the player characters are often wearing some sort of hat or head accessory. Not even your rivals wear hats. Well, with the notable exception of Gen 3 and Bianca for some reason. Point is, N does hold a lot of design elements from previous Pokemon protagonists. So you've got a lot going on here with the meta concept as to why N is supposed to be a good foil to the player character. From the concepts of the Pokemon games themselves to the very design of N. But there's more to a character than just the meta concepts. There's also the narrative to be considered here. As I said before, N is what you can consider an ideological opponent to the very concept of Pokemon and its fictional world. Granted, it's obviously one of extremism and thinking that N is a hero. In the lore of Pokemon Black and White, there's a myth of Unova, concerning the two legendary dragon Pokemon, Reshiram and Zekrom, each of them representing a different aspect. Reshiram represents the truth, and Zekrom represents idealism. These two Pokemon are complete opposites to each other, but were part of a singular dragon that was split in half by two brothers who represent the two conflicting points of view, with the two of them battling for ages. And this is something that proceeds into the story of Pokemon Black and White. You see, depending on which version you're playing, N will either represent truth or idealism, either version claiming that his ideals can lead to a much better world for humans or Pokemon, or believing he knows the truth that Pokemon are suffering while they're under their trainer's control. It's kind of why we didn't get like a Pokemon Gray if you think about it, since it would essentially go against the notion of how a world isn't just black and white but many shades of gray. N doesn't want power or world domination. That's just his ass of a father who wants that. No? N sees himself on par with the brothers of Legend and Unova, raising the point of view of either truth or ideals in his actions. A lot of the time, Pokemon games don't really address the moral complications of their world, battling, capturing. Sure, you had some similar games like Temtem that address how something like that can be traumatic to the monsters in that world. It's just a shame that Temtem shoots themselves in the foot when you get money in the game by catching and releasing Temtem. Kind of a bad decision there, mates. But anyway, this is important because the roles that both N and the player have with each other. Because whether or not you agree with N, the idea is to confront ideals or truth, and take a moment for critical thinking between the two forces. The retelling of the myth, the player taking on the opposing role of the brothers, the push for a change, that's what drives Pokemon, and it's because of that rivalry between the player and N that spurs the plot of the entire region, or even the gym leaders and the 7 sages of Team Plasma show up to fight for what they believe in. It's actually more of a proactive approach when the other characters in the game have a part in the actual conflict. It gives the player more of a reason to fight against N, since it's just not one kid fighting against the evil bad guys of the region. Everyone is fighting for what they believe in. I want to talk more about the final battle between N and the protagonist in its own section, and before then we need to talk about the parallel between Gen 5 and Gen 1. In Generation 1, your rival, Gary, Blue, Ass, he beat you to become the champion of the league. He got there first! And to point something out, N does the same thing with the champion Adler. I mean, unlike Blue, N kinda raised an entire castle at the Pokemon League, which, wow, talk about property damage! At least he's got a fair bit of style going on. But yeah, before you can even battle the champion Adler, you're interrupted and you're pitted against N. As you travel to the castle, you actually visit N's room, and it's here you learn more about N and learn one of the greatest secrets of the Pokemon world. Basketball exists! Come on and slam! In any case, when you finally scale the tower and confront N, it's a bit more deeper than the standard final rival battle. N has a code of honor, and throughout your journey in every battle you had with him, you're tempered his ideology. You both have a role to play in this game. You're given the chance to have your own legendary dragon and have a battle between truth and ideals, and wanting to prove his side right. This battle is to show the moral of these games. Extreme ideology is dangerous, and if both sides can take the time to understand each other, it can lead to harmony, even if it requires like a punch to the face to do so. That final fight, the epic music, the opening of the fight, and the two dragons fighting if you, the player, choose to use the legendary dragon on your team. And when you deliver the final blow to N's team, he doesn't pout, he doesn't cry, he accepts his fate. Especially when the true villain of the game, Getsus, drops the facade, proclaiming how he used N, and was prepared to eliminate N the moment his usefulness ran out. You can even see this when you see Getsus' team has a type advantage that's made to handle N's team. Of course, once you defeat Getsus, N learns that he made mistakes in his ideology. He's surprised at how many Pokemon actually cared for their trainers, and how the Pokemon he had with him wanted to be with him during his travels. Having your beliefs to be challenged, and learning that you can't just force your beliefs on others, the best way to have others understand you is to communicate, either through words or through having fun. N didn't understand why people in Pokemon got along. It was only because he kept on battling you, the player, and seeing your bond with your Pokemon that he actually understood it. He grew as a character by listening to others, not just you pushing your beliefs onto others in the world. It's a lesson that many in our own world have yet to learn, and it's sad, really. N is a representation of both idealism and truth. How many of us start off being idealistic, believing that we know how the world is and what we believe out there is the one truth. We as humans believe that we know everything, and when we're challenged as people, it's easier to just hide away from opposing viewpoints. But our worldviews aren't set in stone. New information is always being presented to us. Our perspectives are challenged, and we've learned that sometimes we were misled by those we trust. It's just that some of us are just way too damn stubborn to actually want to listen to opposing viewpoints. N as a character represents the process of gaining knowledge through experience, opening yourself up to views that are outside your narrow mindset, and realizing that rejecting your initial conceptions isn't a terrible thing. It's a mark of growth and maturity. N searched for the truth or idealized his beliefs, and through his journey through Unova, it showed him that the world isn't black and white. Get it? This is why this generation is called black and white. But rather, the world is cast in many shades of gray. Gen 5 is a very controversial part of Pokemon's history, for a plethora of reasons, but to me, it represents the best of the series has to offer. And I'm not just talking in terms of graphics or gameplay, but obviously the story. In my mind, ever since Gen 5, Pokemon hasn't actually managed to hit that same sweet spot of storytelling that makes me love the games. And N is a character as well. N is the catalyst of these games' stories. Thematically, he shows the players how dangerous it can be to not want to listen to opposing viewpoints and by trying to shove your beliefs onto others. Trust me, I've had that happen to me myself. We can only grow if we open ourselves up to the wider world. En is an antagonist, but his motivation extends past the basics of a villain wanting to take over the world. And honestly, En is a character that I deeply respect, and I hope that after this video, you all respect him too. I'm MangaKamen, and thanks for watching. If you reached this part of the video, please leave a comment saying, Natural Harmonia Gropus? Just let me know that you got this far in the video. It's a litmus test. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've been experimenting for a little bit with new content on this channel, trying to be a bit more positive, and I kind of hope I can keep doing it because I enjoy being more positive on this channel than I normally have been. 2022 has been an interesting year so far, and I hope I can keep doing this for a long time. So please, leave me a comment, leave a like, and let me know if this kind of content is what you want to see from me in the future. It would really mean the world to me. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day.